Hi, it's Simon. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Dan from Collaborate Sports for providing me with an opportunity to talk to this mentorship group. Because for a number of years now, my interest has been in understanding how to create or construct a narrative that helps coaches to become the coaches that they want to become. The question that I'm helping myself and others answer is, under what conditions do you do your best work as a coach? How do you build a place where you belong? And that's really what we're going to dig into today. For brevity, I'll use the word coach as a coverall term for coach, practitioner, sport and exercise scientist. When you see the word coach, what do you think it means? Perhaps you see a coach as the person standing on the sideline with a whistle shouting instructions. Maybe you see a coach at the center of a huddle providing encouragement to the players. Or perhaps you see the coach as the person that you feel that you can go to when you need to have a conversation about difficult things. How you see the world, your worldview, is based on your biases, your instincts, and your assumptions. It is a place from which you judge a person's actions. Whatever you think a coach does matters. It matters because your perspective is your truth. It is tempting to imagine that a successful career is about choosing the right path, perhaps waiting for the right opportunity to shine, or when you have sufficient resources to create your own path. But none of that answers the question. In fact, it delays answering the question. It leaves it up to circumstance or for someone else to decide for you. It's passive, it's not active. Now, Konstantin Stanislavski was a theatre practitioner, and he was a theatre practitioner famed for creating engaging characters on stage. As part of his process, he asked three questions: who am I? What just happened? And what do I want? I personally became an expert. That's just what happened. I was in active pursuit of expertise, but passive in my understanding of the conditions required to be my best. My view of an expert was someone with qualifications, accreditations, and experience. So that's what I pursued. I became an accredited sport and exercise scientist with BASIS and a certified strength and conditioning coach with the NSCA. I worked for a number of professional football clubs, national governing bodies, and even individual performance athletes. I published a paper in Medicine and Science and Sport and Exercise, defended a number of posters at national conferences, appeared on TV shows, on radio, and even built my own performance center with a sports science lab and conditioning space. As for knowing the answers to the question, who am I and what do I want, I hadn't given it much or any thought. The principles and values that I held as a coach were no clearer to me than they were to anyone else. So before we go any further, let us remind ourselves of the difference between a principle and a value. A principle is an unarguable truth. The principle of diminishing returns is one such principle. Since our capacity for physical strength is finite, there comes a time when we can no longer expect to see our levels of strength grow in a linear fashion. At some point, our linear relationship with increasing levels of strength will flatten, and that is the point of diminishing returns. We can consider our values like maps. We assume the way we see things is the way things are, or the way things should be. Our attitude and our behavior grow out of these assumptions. The way we see things is the source of the way we think and the way we act. And in the end, it's how we act that counts. Now, knowing what we want is critical to understanding how we act. As a coach, once you understand what is behind your actions, you can begin to create and tell a better story. The story I'm about to tell you was written to encourage you to put yourself on the hook. Imagine that you're a total novice at skipping, someone who's never really tried it before. Maybe you're a kid, maybe you're an adult who's had very little experience with skipping. The bottom line is, whatever your experience, you're no skipping expert. Now, we can split the coaching practice into three areas: the task, the skill, and the environment. The task is to skip. The skill is to jump and to land and to orientate yourself in space. The environment, well, that's the experience that you want to create for your learners and for yourself as the coach. Now, for the person who is learning to skip, all expectations are associated with the task. We can wonder what people will think of us. We can worry about whether we're going to be any good at this, or should we even really care about skipping? Is it even relevant? It takes real guts to commit to a task and to give it our best shot. Maybe you feel the same way about sharing your values and assumptions and beliefs that you hold within your coaching practice. But there is some good news. The task is rarely ever the point. In fact, the task is to skip, but skipping is not the point. The action or the point is learning to jump, to land, and to orientate yourself in space. And of course, to have an experience that you've created for yourself and for others. When we confuse the task with the point, we often find it far easier to play along and hide than we do to put it on the line and to commit and go all in. And it is understandable that maybe we want to look brilliant at the task, but the real opportunity, the opportunity that we will miss if we consider and worry about looking brilliant at the task, is the chance to upskill ourselves and observe our environment, how it works for us and against us. So what is the cost of putting yourself fully on the line and going all in? In this example, it is to give you a mental model of coaching some air. Stand next to it, challenge it, accept challenges, and edit it until successful. And maybe for a while, it won't go brilliantly well. Maybe it won't be well received, or even people just won't care. But the alternative is to play along. And when we play along, we end up in a place that we don't belong. So this is a question that we started with. And how do we go about owning what we do? It's easy to think that the client, the athlete, or your line manager carries the can, that we are not in control of very much at all. After all, we tell them what to do, and if they don't do it, not our problem. So let us remind ourselves of that question that we started with, and it still remains unanswered. Under what conditions do I do my best work? To answer the question requires us to make an assumption. And that assumption is this: we can work under our own terms, that we can take responsibility for our actions, and we can do the work to understand the meaning of those terms and the conditions required to uphold them. Here's a simple coaching manifesto that I put together for my kids' football team. The question that I was trying to answer with my actions was this: how do I develop my kids in a competitive world, whilst also creating the right conditions for me to do my best work? Here's that same information again, but this time I've split it into 4 quadrants, each led by a question. The same 4 questions that I used to help me make decisions, and the 4 chapter titles, at least I hope they're chapter titles, for the book that I'm writing called Good Coach, Bad Coach, which should hopefully be released this year in 2023. Now, in the top right-hand corner, you can see a question: who are you? This is a question that gives you the opportunity to outline your worldview based off your assumptions, your biases, and your values. It helps us to understand the place where you are coming from. In the second quadrant, with the question, what is really important to you? This is where I detailed my expectations of the things that were important to me, what I wanted to see in my coaching environment, and what I didn't want to see. The third quadrant is driven by the question what to focus on. What you measure and what you pay attention to is led by this very question. If you've ever heard of the phrase, what gets measured gets managed, this is the mantra for the third quadrant. But I can assure you that if you spend more time upstream with this question, by answering the first 2 questions, who are you and what is really important to you, the chances are the things that you find important and you want to measure in quadrant 3 will change. Quadrant 3 for me, I've nicknamed it the panic room. When we rush around measuring things, trying to prove that we can create change, this is where we go, straight towards the panic room, often missing the point. The final quadrant is led by the question, how do you want to show up? Now, the whole process is circular, and how you want to show up is your chance to help you to self-define who you are. For me, creating this coaching manifesto, I was motivated by fear. Now, remember what I said earlier, understand what's behind your actions. The psychologist Carl Jung is quoted as saying, where the fear is, there is your task. I have absolutely no reason to doubt it. The role of a coaching manifesto is to create a narrative that helps you to become the coach that you want to become, to overcome your fears, and to bring yourself forward, to show you at your best. It doesn't even need to be that good to start with, or even true, but it does need to put you on the hook. Now, a word on being fixed. Being fixed is no fun at all. And yet here I am, stating with conviction and in plain language what I believe in. I've left no room for doubts. So what's up with that? The joint-by-joint approach reminds us that a stable knee requires both a mobile ankle and a mobile hip. For us to experience and understand flexibility, we also need to understand and experience inflexibility. It is my assumption that in this case, inflexibility comes before flexibility. No unwritten rules is the task. Give your coaching model, give it whatever you think of coaching, give it some air, your worldview, your assumptions and your biases. What you stand for needs to be obvious. Now, the upside of putting paper to pen, creating a coaching manifesto and putting yourself on the hook is the chance to first create a learning environment for yourself, a chance to find out if what you say you believe in is really what you do believe in, and to examine the narrative that is required to help you to become the coach that you want to become. Of course, it is likely that this will all take time, which is why now is the right time. Now is the best time to practice with others, once you have first laid down your placeholder, your marker. Because while this task is to put down a marker, and that might feel daunting, it is the skill of leadership and the environment in which you are in that is at stake. You've just enrolled in a mentorship group, an environment of practice, and a place to hold each other up and to account. So, if you are willing to summon up the courage to put down a placeholder of who you are, make a statement of what is important to you, set the bar of what you expect of yourself as a coach, and then, after doing all that work, be flexible enough to change. You may never consider yourself an expert, but you can consider yourself well on the way to being a good coach. Now, if there's one thing that I want you to take away from this talk, it is to have the courage to put down your mark. I've been Simon Harling. Thank you for listening.